be doing the presentation for you.
Thank you. Mr. Newcomb.
Good evening.
Good evening.
As you can expect, it's been a busy day at City Yard as we are trying desperately to get ready for what's headed our way tomorrow. So Greg asked me to put together some information that I'll share with you tonight. Basically kind of an overview of our typical policy, our standard operating procedures, and then some more specific information about what's happening over the next few days with this impending storm. So this first slide here just kind of gives you an overview of what the city has at its disposal. We see we have 2,000 tons of de-icing salt. I will let you know that we used about 1,300 tons 2 weeks ago during the event, and most of that was predicated on that first layer melted on us and then froze solid. So we had a layer of ice on a lot of streets underneath that 1.5 inches of snow. So it took a little bit of effort to get that melted away. But we did get a shipment in last week of another 1,300 tons to refill our bin, so it's basically at capacity now for this week's storm. When we go into snow mode, we operate 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, as long as necessary. We run 2 12-hour shifts so that we're fully staffed. The equipment that's at our disposal, as you see there, we have 5 motor graders, which you typically see those in a roadway grading operation, but they're actually quite handy dealing with most snow events that we have here in Winston-Salem. We have 30 trucks equipped with push plows, 25 of which are our dump trucks that are also equipped with the salt spreaders. So we do have a few trucks that we do have just plows on, which are useful in some residential neighborhoods with narrower streets. And then recently, in the last few years, we've added the 3 brine storage tanks with the 3 pumps on trucks. We also have a smaller unit that we use on smaller residential streets, and all 4 of those trucks, as you probably know, have been out and about today. So some of our standard operating procedures, I know a popular topic today is the brine. I mentioned that we were out there today. This is a pre-treatment that's applied before a storm event. And the basic function of the brine is when snow or ice falls on a roadway, it literally forms a bond with the asphalt. So the 2 materials practically become one. And that makes it difficult on the back end to then melt and remove that material. So where the brine is shown to be helpful is when applied before a storm, it can either delay or in some cases hold off that bond, so that even if we were to get a foot of snow on top of a brine, that hopefully when we got down to that bottom layer we could push it away and it would be more slushy than it would be bound to the road. So the way we do our program here in Winston-Salem is we start with local residential streets and try to cover all the residential streets, and if we cover those we move up to collectors and then up to major streets. All of that predicated on the conditions and how long we have when we know a storm is coming before it actually occurs. And the last bullet there is that the brine should not be applied if precipitation is going to start as rain. The obvious reason is that it would wash it away. And so we would spend some resources to get the material out on the street, but if it starts as rain instead of snow or ice, then it's just going to wash away that material and not do us any good. The next point down is that you'll often wonder, well, why have we not put out any salt yet? We try to wait until there's a little bit of moisture on the roadway. And the reason for that is because if we don't, the salt will tend to blow away as traffic goes over it. A lot of times our winter storms here in Winston come with a lot of wind. This one's going to come with a lot of wind tomorrow. So we want a little bit of moisture there so that salt will stay in place. And then as traffic goes over it, it packs it down and it gets on that material and melts it right away. We tend to plow roads with 1 inch of snow or more. And our general practice is to put the plows on the trucks when the forecast is for 2 inches or more. Now, 2 weeks ago, they weren't calling for more than 2 inches, but we were able to see that we were going to be able to push some material. So we went ahead and put the plows on the trucks. So it's not a hard rule, but it is something that we tend to look for 2 inches or more in the forecast before we start putting the plows on. When it comes to an actual snow removal situation, I mentioned to you that when we do the brine, we start on residential streets and then work our way up. And the reason for that is because the snow removal works in the opposite fashion. We start with major streets, and once we get those clear to the pavement, then we drop to collectors, same process, get them clear to the pavement, and then move to the residential streets. This is probably the number one question we get asked as a department, and council members probably get asked this question as well about residential streets. And the reason being, I'll just give you an example. My wife and I rent a house in Ardmore off of Academy Street, off of Brent Street, exactly. So if city crews started plowing residential streets, if they plowed Brent Street first, that'd be great. I would get out of my driveway, I would drive up Brent Street, and I would get to Academy, and I would not be able to go anywhere because Academy is one of our major routes. So that's why we start with major and then work our way down, so that when folks get out of their neighborhoods, they actually have a place to go, a way to get out. We divide the city up into 5 areas, and then we have 6 dump trucks with spreaders and plows and a motor grader assigned to each of those areas. So we run 5 crews in each 12-hour shift to make sure we have each area of the city covered. And I wanted to show you this next. This is a typical example of a snow route map that our crews use. This one in particular is just Route 11, but I wanted to show you this because you see the red roadways are marked out as major streets, and then the blue dash lines mark out the collectors, and the rest of the streets within the route are the local streets. So if you were a crew coordinator over this route, you would work with your crews on a snow removal to clear the red streets first. Then you would drop down to those collectors. In this case, this route only has those 2 collector streets, or those 2 areas with collector streets. Once those were cleared, they would drop down and begin on the residential streets. So now what everybody wants to know is what's going to happen here. I tell the news people ask me that all the time, and I tell them if I knew exactly what it was going to do, I'd be a millionaire, because nobody knows exactly what's going to happen. So we decided not to brine our streets yesterday. That was a question that we asked as a staff, and we huddled together. You know, what happened yesterday afternoon was it looked like it was snowing, but as soon as it hit the ground, it was melting. And, you know, actually my house water was running in the gutter as if I was getting a rain shower. So our concern with brining was that we would have been wasting our resources. I know the state and some other cities in the area decided to move forward with their operations, but we just didn't feel like we'd get any benefit out of it if we did it yesterday. The forecast originally showed some of the snow beginning to earlier, this evening, but now that start of the snow has been pushed to either I'd say probably 9 to 11 a.m. tomorrow morning, and it's going to continue most likely all the way through Thursday morning. The latest advisory we just received from AccuWeather indicated a period of extremely heavy snow tomorrow afternoon. So my guess is once it begins to snow, we will likely see conditions on the roadways deteriorate pretty quickly. So the other thing I've been telling all the news people today when they've given me the opportunity is I've encouraged people, if you don't have to be out and about tomorrow, then please stay home because it could get dangerous really quick. The other thing that has us concerned is the potential for periods of sleet and freezing rain in addition to the snow. If we end up with just a snow event, it's much easier to push it out of the way, but if it gets layers of ice mixed in there, it could complicate things and could make the conditions on the roads that much more dangerous. And the forecasts since this weekend have been all over the map, but now we seem to be settling in, I put 10 to 12 on the slide, we seem to be settling into an 8 to 12 inch forecast with the potential, obviously, for some pockets to get even more than that. But I would say we're probably in a safe bet to get 8 to 12 here in Winston-Salem pretty easily. And the amount of snow we get is going to depend on how much sleet and freezing rain we may end up with on Wednesday evening. So, as everyone at the yard has said today, that's the big one. This winter we've had a lot of close calls and near misses, but this one doesn't look like it's going to be that. So the preparations that we have made so far, we have all our spreaders and plows are on the trucks. I mentioned the number earlier. We have actually 26 trucks with plows and spreaders loaded up this time, and then the 6 trucks with just plows. We have called in personnel from other departments to make sure we are fully staffed, and I'm happy to say that I would like to give a big thank you to the other departments who have volunteered their personnel, because we are fully staffed both day and night shifts on each crew. So we have all the equipment operators we need and all the truck drivers we need as well. My anticipation is that we will likely load our salt probably early tomorrow morning. I'm going to meet with our staff at the shift change in a little bit here to go over what our plan is. But because of the timing, we changed shift at 10 a.m., so we're probably going to load before the shift change so that when the shift change happens, we are ready to hit the streets and go. I mentioned already that the brine operation started this morning. We plan to continue that through the night and into tomorrow morning until the snow begins to fall, just so we can try to cover as many streets as possible. I mentioned that you don't want to, we'll stop that once the snow begins, so we'll try to cover as many of those streets as we can. Inevitably, though, I can tell you that it will be unlikely we'll get through all of the residential streets. If you look at that example of a map, you see how the neighborhoods get broken up. It's not like we can drive from one residential street to another. We often have to go back out of a neighborhood and back into another one. And so it makes it cumbersome to try to get through them, but we'll get through as many as we can, certainly. And our next steps, as I mentioned, once the snow begins, our crews will begin to plow and salt our major streets. Depending on how heavy it comes down, sometimes it gets to the point where it's difficult to stay out in front of how quickly it's falling, but we'll do our best. And then once we get the major streets clear, we will drop down to the collectors. At this point, because the timetable keeps shifting, I'd put on here that we anticipate continuing the operation through at least Friday. I would say that that's probably a safe bet now that the timeline for the storm has been pushed back. The good news is that Friday's forecast currently is for highs in the upper 40s with a chance of rain showers, which would, if that were to come to fruition, Mother Nature would help us out tremendously. So I suspect the pushing operation will continue at least through Friday and possibly into Saturday as we try to get all of our streets cleared. So that's all I had. I guess I can take any questions that you might have.
Questions? Good presentation. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Brian. It is what it is.
So take home the slideshow information and have it by your phone for the next week.